Well, as you heard, Alice Springs isn't just the only part of the country that's battling with youth crime. In some Brisbane suburbs, bus drivers are refusing to stop at night due to ongoing gang attacks. And we're hearing today that Queensland has the highest rate of youth reoffending in the country, with more than half of those who are sentenced to detention or probation back before the court within 12 months. Well, one man who's not afraid to talk about this is Queensland Opposition leader David Crisafulli. David, thanks so much for your time. These are shocking statistics from the Productivity Commission today. How has youth crime gotten so out of control in Queensland?
Well, it dates back to a decision in 2015 when this government first came to office, Cory, and they made a deliberate decision to water down the Youth Justice Act to remove consequences for actions. And as a result, you've got a generation of repeat hardcore young offenders who know that their rights outweigh the rights of the victim. And we have cars being stolen at record rates. We've got homes being broken into. We have people who have lost their lives to knives in their own home and walking home on the street. And the Premier finally got back from leave yesterday and couldn't even say the word crisis, despite all that Queenslanders are feeling at the moment. And there just seems to be a real disconnect. And we want to debate the laws. We want to fix what was broken. And our Parliament doesn't go back for another month. We don't sit until the end of February. That's an absolute disgrace at a time when this state needs leadership.
It certainly does. I've heard you and others in the coalition talking about this problem for a very, very long time. Nothing seems to have happened, but now suddenly the Premier says she's got reforms to implement. What ideas are on the table, and are they going to be enough to do the job that's required?
Cory, this is about the sixth version over the last few years of a something point plan. I think we're up to a 10-point plan. Now, when there was a tragedy on Australia Day where a young couple with an unborn child was mowed down by a guy high out on bail, the community was in uproar. As a result, the government implemented this strategy about a 6-point plan. We looked at it, and we made the reflection that there were many things in that legislation that wouldn't work, and we pointed out what we would do better. Now, despite that, my style has always been, I won't stand in the way of any change if it can move things that far forward. But the signature project on this was GPS trackers for repeat offenders in the community. We looked at the legislation and said that won't work. One of the reasons why a young offender doesn't have to wear it is because they don't want to, as though it's a fashion accessory. Now, fast forward 18 months, and there's been less than 10 have been fitted. It's been an abject failure. Now, my concern is we're going to go through a whole nother rush of changes because the government sees this as a political problem rather than a law and order problem, and yet it won't do the number one thing that's needed, and that is embed consequences for action, punishment for bad behaviour in the system. And in Queensland at the moment, breach of bail isn't an offence in the Youth Justice Act. So think about that. A young offender gets conditions, and a police officer cannot hold that young person accountable until they steal another car, break into another home, destroy another family's life. They cannot be held accountable for those conditions until they offend again. You don't mean to tell me that's a broken system, and they just won't listen and they just won't act?
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a broken system to me. David Crisafulli, thank you very much for joining me on Inside the News tonight.